America, I'm Mark Levin, and this is a special Labor Day Life, Liberty, and Levin. Why do they call it Labor Day when everybody takes off? They should call it Taxpayer Day, because half the country doesn't work and doesn't want to work, whereas the other half works very, very hard, breaks their butts to subsidize the other half. In other words, we're busy subsidizing Democrats. Okay. But I want to honor those of you who do work and do make this country as great as it is, that do believe in the capitalist system, in the American system. You're the ones we celebrate today. You're the ones I celebrate in today's special show. And to celebrate it, we have some great guests that we've seen throughout the year. You're going to love this. And let's start with our buddy, Pete Hegseth. One of my favorite people in the world is Pete Hegseth. A hero, great patriot, incredibly smart, and a fighter. That's what he is, and it's an honor to have you on the program, Pete. You have written a book that is so greatly important. I don't know how you timed it so perfectly. Battle for the American Mind, Uprooting a Century of Miseducation. This applies to everything going on in this country today. And if the radical left has control of education, K through 12, and brainwashing and indoctrinating our children, it's over. Why did you write this book?
I wrote this book because I don't want it to be over, Mark, like you. And I realize only an educated populace is a free populace. And of course, that's what our founders understood. That's what you know. That's also what the left knows. First of all, you wrote a book that contributed a lot to it, American Marxism. This book laid out what's happened in our country. I have it right here, the embargoed original copy. What we humbly hope this book is basically American Marxism for the classroom, K through 12. A full expose of how the lunacy you see, genderism, gender pronouns for 8-year-olds, critical race theory, 1619 Project, that didn't pop up out of nowhere. It was part of an intentional, first gradual, then sudden, as Hemingway said, takeover of the minds of our kids. And you see it now in the lunacy, and you might think, oh, this is just an accident of the 60s, or a few radical teachers unions, or Joe Biden, or Common Core, or Barack Obama. No. This is a 100-year, over 100-year progressive project. You know names like John Dewey and Francis Willard and the whole Frankfurt School. Chapter 6, to tie it to current events, Mark, is the straight line from critical theory to Antifa. How the ideas that promulgated in places like Columbia University and that teacher's college, when the Marxists landed there, have made their ways into first the classroom and the curriculum and the pedagogy and everything, but now into our streets, because they are breeding a new class of radical leftist activists coming out of not just universities, but high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools. And what I want to do with this book is equip parents and grandparents to understand the depth of the problem so that they can be a part of the solution and radically reorient how they educate their kids first, and then get to how we address the larger system as well.
You know, Pete Hegseth, I've spent a lot of time studying this, and yet I learned a lot from your book. It really exposes the underbelly of what's been taking place in this country in the classroom. And I would strongly encourage parents and grandparents and everybody who cares about the future of this country to grab a copy of Battle for the American Mind. You and I were talking before the program of the book called The Closing of the American Mind by Alan Bloom, and he was focused on colleges and universities. That was a very, very important book at the time that resonated throughout society. It's my deepest hope that Battle for the American Mind, which is the focus on the public school system, on what goes on in the classrooms and how we got to where we are, what's happening today, what we can do about it, that this resonates as well. It is very important when people show up at school board meetings, they have this book under their arm. I touched on it in the book, but you expand on this issue like nobody I've ever seen. It's very, very important. As you point out in the book, there is a reason they're pushing critical race theory. There is a reason they're attacking the nuclear family. There is a reason they don't want parents involved. Now, you say this started 100 years ago or so, which is true. What was the goal of John Dewey and these other so-called early progressives in the earlier part of the last century?
Societal change, Mark. It was a reversal of Western Christian tradition. They masked it under the idea of more vocational training. That you didn't need a generation of kids in rural America or in inner city. You needed to train them for an industrial economy, a future economy. That's how they spun it. In reality, every single name I've listed, from Francis Willard to Francis Bellamy, who created the first Pledge of Allegiance, to John Dewey, to the Frankfurt School, they're all atheists, socialists, and Marxists. And what they knew is if they wanted radical societal, humanist change, they wanted a future utopia of what they would call equality. Now today they say equity, which is total crumbling of the capitalist system and of our Western-style republic. They had to undermine free thinking. And they had to replace the key ingredients. What's the most key ingredient they replaced, Mark? It was God. It was, and they knew that parents would have revolted in the early 20th century if they did that. So like a precious artifact on a pressure plate, they took God off and they replaced it with something that looked just like it. And what they replaced it with, and this is shocking for people like you and me who revere our flag and our pledge and our country, is they replaced it with patriotism and the flag. And they put in a new Pledge of Allegiance called the Bellamy Salute after the Roman salute, which did not include under God. When it was first instituted by a socialist. They created a brand new network of schools, one called the Gary Plan in Gary, Indiana, which removed God. Now, fast forward 80 years, as their pipeline of progressive and Marxist thinking goes, they never cared about patriotism in America and the flag, so they're happy to get rid of it. It was all incremental steps toward an atheist societal change of humanism and secularism. And the belief that it goes back to the Marxist battle of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Although that didn't work in class, as you know, as you wrote about in American Marxism, with class, so they moved into race and gender and more cultural issues of cultural Marxism. And real quick on the idea of Frances Willard. She was a socialist feminist in the 1870s who wanted to get rid of alcohol. And so she put in anti-alcohol curriculum into the third grade classrooms across America. Voila, a generation later, not only was alcohol banned, there was a constitutional amendment passed to prohibit it. The progressives in the early 20th century studied that, and they said, the classroom is the most powerful tool we have for societal change. And so they started to create new schools that could do those types of things. And they wrote about it openly in the New Republic. And a big part of our research, I wrote this book with David Goodwin. He's an expert on classical Christian education. He's amazing. Big part of our research was looking at the New Republic and what John Dewey and other atheist, progressive, socialists were talking about. They openly talked about how important education was toward their goals. And they had to remove God, and they had to remove the free-thinking aspect of it. And they just believe it's the same condescending view that our elites have today, Mark. Average people don't need to think about philosophy or politics or economics. Just give them a skill, tell them what to think, and make them go away. Those people become easier to control. The idea of the liberal arts was a liberated mind. You know this. And that's what they wanted to get rid of.
The book is Battle for the American Mind. You can get it at Amazon.com, any major bookstore. It really is the book about education for our time as far as I'm concerned.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.